The Kentucky autumn of 1834 was unnaturally harsh. An early frost killed the crops outside Sorrow Hollow, a town clinging to limestone cliffs above a river the color of tarnished pewter. The air tasted of wood smoke and decay. Into this bleakness, twins were born to the Godfrey family, Eliza and Esther. From the first breath, they were wrong. Their cries were synchronized, a chilling harmony. Their eyes, a shade too deep, too knowing. Whispers began not of blessing, but of an omen fulfilled under the swollen, bloody harvest moon. The local preacher, Reverend Ebner Thorne, visited the cramped cabin. He saw the infants lying unnervingly still, their gazes locked not on their mother, but on the shadowed rafters. He crossed himself not with reverence, but with a tremor of fear he couldn't name. He spoke no blessing. He simply left. The town held its breath, waiting for the axe to fall. It happened when the girls were 3. Esther scraped her knee playing near the bluffs, a simple fall, yet as she wailed, Eliza, inside the cabin, clutched her own unblemished knee and screamed in perfect unison. Minutes later, a crimson bloom appeared on Eliza's dress, precisely where Esther bled. Not a transfer, not a smudge, a welling stain. Panic seized the Godfreys. The town doctor, a pragmatic man named Elihu Grant, scoffed. Hysterics, contagious imagination. He bandaged Esther. Eliza's phantom wound vanished. But the stain remained on the floorboards, stubborn, refusing all scrubbing, a dark rust-colored accusation. The whispers sharpened, sympathy bleeders, witches' marks, bad blood. Sorrow Hollow wasn't built on faith, it was built on fear. Founded by breakaway zealots seeking purification, its history was etched in the town's grim architecture, the overbearing stone church, the squat, windowless asylum on the hill, the orphanage run by the austere Sisters of Mercy. Secrets weren't shared, they were buried deep, like the limestone caves beneath the bluffs. The Godfreys became pariahs, doors slammed shut as they passed, children threw stones, chanting rhymes older than the town itself. Twin of flesh, twin of bone, spill the blood, reap what's sown. The twins walked hand in hand, their identical faces pale islands in a sea of hostility. They spoke less, communicating in glances, shared flinches, a language born of shared dread. Reverend Thorne saw the twins not as children, but as a theological crisis made flesh. Their unnatural bond threatened the doctrine of individual souls. He consulted the town's hidden patriarchs, Judge Silas Crow and asylum director Mordecai Vance. In the damp, candlelit crypt beneath St. Perpetua's church, illuminated only by a stained glass window depicting a saint's martyrdom, they met. The air smelled of damp earth and incense gone rancid. Thorne presented the problem, the bleeding, the whispers, the growing fear. Vance, a man whose eyes held the cold gleam of surgical steel, saw opportunity. The flesh is weak, Reverend, the bond can be severed, studied. Crow, fingering a heavy iron key, murmured, for the good of the hollow, for the preservation of order. A pact was sealed not with blood, but with silence. Winter came early and brutal. A fire, suspiciously swift and fierce, consumed the Godfrey cabin. Only the twins were found alive, huddled miraculously unscathed in the root cellar, surrounded by charred timbers. Orphans, the Sisters of Mercy took them in. Mother Superior Agatha, her face a mask of starched linen beneath her wimple, received them not with compassion, but with grim duty. The orphanage was a place of echoing corridors, thin gruel, and prayers recited like condemnations. The twins were separated, Esther to the east dormitory, Eliza to the west. That first night, separated by cold stone walls, both girls screamed, not cries of fear, but of agony. Deep, identical gashes appeared on their left forearms. No blade, no cause, just blood-soaking thin nightshirts. Mother Agatha saw the wounds. She didn't call the doctor. She called Reverend Thorne. The experiment began. Doctor Vance arrived at the orphanage with 2 orderlies. He took Eliza, not to the infirmary, but to a converted coal cellar, the quiet room, thick stone iron door, inside, a cot, a chair, a single barred window high up. Vance explained nothing. He strapped Eliza's small arm to a wooden rest. He produced a lancet. We must understand the connection, child, for your soul's sake. He made a shallow cut on her palm, Down the hall in her own locked room, Esther gasped, clutching her own palm. Blood welled identically. Vance watched Eliza, then sent an orderly to check Esther. The report confirmed it. A chilling smile touched Vance's lips. Sympathetic hematogenesis. He made another cut, deeper. Esther's scream echoed faintly through the stone. The tests escalated. Controlled burns applied to Eliza's calf produced blisters on Esther. Starving Eliza made Esther retch bile. Confinement induced panic attacks in both, miles apart. Vance documented everything in precise, detached script. He theorized a somatic resonance, a physical entanglement defying known science. Reverend Thorne saw demonic sympathy, a shared corruption requiring spiritual severance. Mother Agatha enforced the isolation, believing suffering purified. The twins became phantoms within the orphanage walls, pale, silent, moving with an eerie synchronicity whenever they glimpsed each other in the refectory or chapel. Their eyes held a depth of shared suffering that terrified the other children. Whispers followed them, the bleeding sisters. Their bond wasn't broken, it was distilled into a silent, agonizing scream resonating through their very bones. The town's fear curdled into open hatred. A blight struck Leavestock, a child drowned in the river. Superstition blamed the twins. Reverend Thorne preached fire and brimstone, his gaze fixed on the Godfrey girls in the pews. Judge Crow signed an order, citing moral insanity and public endangerment. Vance was ready. One rain, lashed night, black carriage wheels churned mud as orderlies dragged the struggling twins from the orphanage. Mother Agatha watched from her window, her rosary beads clutched tight, her lips moving in prayer that sounded like a curse. The Sisters of Mercy Orphanage released them into the custody of the Sorrow Hollow Asylum for the irreclaimable. The heavy iron gates, crowned with rusted spikes like a broken crown, swallowed them whole. The asylum was a monument to despair-echoing screams, the clang of locks, the pervasive stench of carbolic acid failing to mask urine and rot. Vance had prepared a special wing, the White Rooms, 2 identical padded cells side by side but utterly isolated, thick doors with only a small barred grate, soundproofed, light-controlled. Here, Vance could conduct his research without interference, without witness. The twins were stripped, scrubbed raw, dressed in coarse linen shifts, placed in their cells, the doors slammed shut. Absolute silence, absolute isolation, but Vance knew the connection persisted. He installed observation slits. He began with sensory deprivation. How long until the bond frayed? How long until one broke and took the other with her? Days blurred into weeks in the suffocating white. Eliza traced the rough padding with a finger. Esther, in her cell, traced the same pattern on her wall. Eliza hummed a fragment of a hymn they'd sung at the orphanage. Esther's lips moved silently, forming the same notes. Vance watched, fascinated. The bond was stronger under duress. He introduced stimuli, a metronome's relentless tick-tock in Eliza's cell. Esther began rocking, her rhythm matching the absent sound. A bright, flickering light in Esther's room induced migraines in Eliza. Reverend Thorne visited, observing through the slit. He saw not suffering children, but proof of a shared demonic tether. "The flesh is weak, doctor," he murmured, "but the spirit must be broken. Sever the cord." Vance nodded. He had a new protocol, Project Sanguis Cordis Blood Heart. Vance believed the shared blood was the key. He theorized a literal, physiological link, perhaps a unique resonance in their blood cells. His plan was medieval, cloaked in pseudoscience. He would bleed one twin extensively, weakening the source, while simultaneously transfusing the other with clean blood procured from Vance himself and compliant orderlies, aiming to overwrite the corrupted bond. He chose Esther as the source, strapped to a cold steel table in a tiled room adjacent to the white cells. Her thin arm was bound. Vance inserted a large bore needle. Blood, dark and vital, flowed into a glass decanter. In her cell, Eliza suddenly convulsed, gasping, clutching her chest as if drowning. Her skin turned ashen. Vance watched both, a cold light in his eyes. The decanter filled. Esther grew weaker, her breathing shallow. Eliza's convulsions worsened. The bond screamed. As Esther weakened near unconsciousness, something unexpected happened. Eliza, in her death throes, began to whisper, not English, not any language Vance recognized. Guttural, rhythmic sounds like stones grinding together. Reverend Thorne, summoned, pressed his ear to Eliza's cell door, his face drained of blood. It's the litany of the fractured soul, he gasped. A forbidden text, how does she know? The whispering intensified, seeming to vibrate the very walls. The lights in the asylum flickered. Down the hall, Esther, though barely conscious, began to move her lips in perfect, silent unison with Eliza's alien chant. The air grew thick, charged with an ancient, oppressive dread. Vance's instruments went haywire. His scientific detachment cracked, replaced by primal fear. He ordered the transfusion into Eliza stopped. The chanting ceased as abruptly as it began. Both girls lay deathly still. The twins hovered near death for days. Vance, shaken, kept them heavily sedated. Reverend Thorne spent hours in the asylum chapel, praying fervently, haunted by the words Eliza spoke, words describing a binding older than bone, a pact written in blood before time. He searched his hidden library, finding fragmented references in a heretical text, tales of twin flames, sharing a single life force, bound by primordial curses or ancient pacts. Was this sympathy bleed, or something far older, far darker? Was their connection not a flaw, but a terrifying echo of something ancient and profane? A storm raged outside, mirroring the turmoil within the asylum walls. Lightning illuminated the white cells, casting monstrous, elongated shadows of the still forms within. Judge Crow arrived, summoned by Thorne's panic. Vance presented his findings coldly. The twins were an aberration, a danger, possibly a conduit for something. Unnatural, Thorne spoke of ancient curses and shared souls. Crow, a man who valued order above all, saw only a problem requiring a final solution. The bond must be severed, permanently, he declared, his voice echoing in Vance's sterile office. The stability of Sorrow Hollow depends on it. Do what is necessary, doctor. Cleanly, quietly, he placed a heavy purse on the desk. Vance understood. The pursuit of knowledge was over. Now came the sanctioned murder. He looked at the orderlies. Prepare the surgical theater. Full anesthesia. For both. The theater was cold, lit by harsh electric arcs, a new, jarring technology in the old asylum. Eliza lay on one table, Esther on another, separated by a stained curtain. Ether masks were placed. Vance, scrubbed, held a scalpel. His plan was crude, final. A radical bilateral sympathectomy severing the primary nerve chains, thought to carry autonomic responses. He believed this would sever the physical conduit of their bond. If it didn't kill them, it would leave them broken shells. As the ether took hold, Eliza's hand twitched. Esther's hand mirrored the movement. Vance raised the blade over Eliza's exposed spine. Just as he made the first incision, Eliza's eyes snapped open, unfocused, yet filled with an impossible awareness. Simultaneously, Esther sat bolt upright on her table, tearing off her ether mask, her eyes wide and identically vacant. They didn't scream, they hummed. A low, resonant frequency that vibrated the surgical instruments, made the light fixtures buzz and shatter. Vance staggered back, scalpel clattering. The orderlies clutched their heads. Then the blood began, not from the incision. It seeped from Eliza's pores, from her eyes, her nostrils. Esther mirrored her perfectly. Within seconds, they were drenched in their own crimson tide, the humming rising to a piercing, unbearable shriek that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. The lights died. In the pitch black, the screaming reached a crescendo, then stopped, utter silence. Dawn found a shattered asylum. Vance was found catatonic in a corner, whispering about resonant frequencies and blood harmonics. One orderly had fled into the storm and vanished. The other was found dead, his eardrums burst, eyes wide with terror. The surgical theater was a charnel house. Eliza Godfrey lay dead on her table, her body exsanguinated, a look of profound sorrow frozen on her face. Esther's table was empty. Only a pool of blood remained, leading towards a broken window high on the wall, an impossible escape. Reverend Thorne arrived, took one look, and ordered the immediate burning of Eliza's body and the sealing of the White Wing. An official story was crafted. A tragic fire in the orphanage claimed the Godfrey parents. Esther succumbed to fever. Eliza died in an unfortunate asylum accident. Sorrow Hollow breathed a collective sigh of relief. The stain was erased, but Sorrow Hollow never healed. The blighted land remained barren. Children avoided the old asylum, claiming they heard humming near the boarded-up White Wing or saw twin figures reflected in the dark river. A new whisper began. Esther hadn't died. She lived, a wraith bound to the place of her torment, tethered still to the sister buried in an unmarked grave within the asylum grounds. Locals spoke of the Whispering Well, an old stone cistern near the asylum where, if you listened on still nights, you could hear two voices murmuring just below the water's surface, speaking in unison, speaking in that same impossible language. Decades later, a frail, ancient woman was found wandering the outskirts of Lexington. Miles from Sorrow Hollow, she was incoherent, dressed in rags, clutching a small, smooth river stone. Brought to a charity hospital, she was identified only as Agnes. On her deathbed, feverish, she spoke to the empty chair beside her bed, her voice a dry rasp. "Eliza!" They cut. But the song remains. Her hand clutched at her chest. The blood binds, older than the stones, older than the cross. She turned her head, milky eyes seeming to focus on the nun taking her confession. Thorne, Vance, Crow, they thought they owned the silence, but the silence is the song. We are the echo. She fell silent. When the nun leaned closer, she saw identical, faint scars on both of the old woman's forearms. Agnes's final breath was a whispered name, Esther. The hospital record listed her as Jane Doe. Sorrow Hollow is a ghost town now. The asylum ruins crumble into the Kentucky limestone. The river still flows, dark and slow. But sometimes, under a full moon, hikers report strange things. The metallic taste of blood on the wind near the old cistern. The unnerving feeling of being watched by two pairs of eyes from the shadows. Or the faint, impossible sound of two little girls humming a broken hymn, perfectly synchronized, carried on the breeze that rustles through the hollow where mercy died and science failed, and an ancient pact written in twin blood still resonates, waiting for the next vessel, waiting to be heard. The Crimson Pact endures. The Sisters of Sorrow are never truly apart. You might hear them, if you listen closely enough in the silence, just before the bleeding starts.